following up directly after that.
And then
that period after Boxing Day, when you don't know whether it's Sunday
or Monday
or Jamhuri Day, it's just there.
I'm Flora Limuki.
Let's take a look at the top stories now. Now you'll now be able to export your goods to the 27 state-rich European Union, tariff and quota-free, after the official signing of the Economic Partnership Agreement between Kenya and the EU. President William Ruto says the trade pact will ensure Kenyan goods get global recognition through entry into the European market, as the country finds means to also extend the trade agreement to encompass labor exportation. And as Hibak Said reports, the pact also came with a considerable 3.5 billion shilling investment in Kenya's green energy, as the country inches closer to a 100% renewable energy status. Yes, to the next story. All Form 1 students will report to their various secondary schools from the 15th of January 2024. Speaking during the release of the 2024 Form 1 selection exercise in the Nana School, Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu said all candidates who scored 400 marks and above were placed in either national or extra county schools of their choice, while all other candidates were placed in county or sub-county schools. Kabianga High School was the most sought-after school in this year's selection exercise, as Andrin Kilemi now reports.
Boys, those.
We'll bring you that report later. Now, the Cabinet Secretary of Roads and Transport, Kipchumba Murkomen, has urged all road users, especially those using private vehicles, to be extra careful when using the roads during this festive season. He added that majority of the road accidents have occurred during the weekends when drivers drink excessive alcohol, and therefore urged on the need to observe traffic laws. Speaking during the launch of the Usalama Barabarani campaign by National Transport and Safety Authority, the president of the Matatu Association, Alex Karagacha, urged the government to provide specialized training for Matatu drivers in a bid to reduce road carnage. All right, and those are the top stories this morning. Let's now take a look at the dailies. And in the dailies, we start off with the Standard today. Scramble for Kenya's dream high schools. That's a big headline on the Standard this morning. Data on Form 1 selection shows Kabianga, Nanyuki and Pangani girls are the most preferred schools. But with limited space in best schools, most candidates have their dreams shattered. The story is extensively covered on pages 6 and 7, and also has faces of some of the 2023 top performers in the KCPE and the schools that they've been placed in. For example, Michael Warutere, who scored 428 marks, will go to Mangu High School. Jacinta Bethany, who scored 427, Kenya High School. Jeremy Rotich, who got 424, Mangu High School. Kangeta Benjamin, who got 420, Starehe Boys Center. And Masharia Ken Wendy, who got 412, will be going to Moi High School, Kabarak. It is the biggest talking point in most of the dailies, and we'll be looking at that. The other big story given prominence on the front page of the Standard today, Hustle, the big Africa fight for European jobs. It's about the labor market. Europe is facing a serious shortage of manpower, while Africa is teeming with young, ambitious workers with no employment opportunities. While common sense dictates Europe allows access to these jobs, many hurdles are placed on immigrants. Stories on pages 2 and 3, also a very good read, given the fact that President William Ruto has been talking more and more about exporting Kenya's labor to the international market. Other stories given prominence on the front page of the Standard: a father's cry over death of first daughter. A family of PhD student Laura Kwasira, who was shot dead by a police officer, demands state apology. That story is on page 15. Elsewhere, Harvey to get 5 million shilling for date with DCI. Court has awarded former Law Society of Kenya President Nelson Havi 5 million shillings for unlawful arrest at the height of the Building Bridges Initiative cases. That story is covered on page 10. Inside, on the financial standard pullout, power blackouts shine spotlight on Kericho.
Ketraco?
On Ketraco, sorry, not Kericho. I think I'm reading my own things. My mind must be on holiday already.
Merry Christmas.
Apologies for that. On the top strip of the Standard, LSK warning on president's use of sword threat. The story is on page 8. Matters EU, Kenya ignores neighbors to sign EU deal. And in sports, stars of East African Safari Classic. That's the front page of the Standard today, yes. If you flip over the newspaper, the Standard, the back page is more about the East Africa Classic Safari Rally. And we have their driver Eugenio Amos and his navigator Paolo Sessi celebrating winning the rally yesterday in Diani, Kwale County. And yes, after 9 days of high-octane action, the 2023 East African Safari Classic Rally is finally over, with Italian giraffe Eugenio Amos and his navigator Paolo Sessi being crowned champions. And that's the Standard this morning.
Well, let's have a look at the Daily Nation. Top story there, Kenya's most sought-after high schools. And yes, during this release of the 2023 KCP results. This is a quote by the Education CS Ezekiel Machogu, and it says, during the release, the 2023 KCP results assured the country that the government had enough capacity to accommodate all the 1.4 million candidates. And yes, all the 1.4 million 2023 Standard 8 candidates have been placed in public secondary schools, the top performers getting their institutions of choice even as Form 1 selection reveals the most popular schools among pupils and parents this year. And just among them is Kabianga High School, Nanyuki High School, Pangani, Kapsabet, Alliance, Maseno, Nakuru, Butere, Mangu High School, as well as Alliance High School. And that story there is on page 6 and 7 of the Daily Nation. Of course, you can get extensive details on that. Other stories on the right strip of the Daily Nation this morning. Murkomen urges caution on roads this festive season, and motorists have been asked to exercise caution during the festive season to minimize road carnage. On matters trade, Kenya woos a region as it inches closer to EU deal, and Kenya wooed the support of its East African community as it inched closer to sealing an agreement with the European Union that will grant its exports duty-free status and unlimited access to the 27-member market bloc. And that's the story on page 10 of the Daily Nation. On matters sports there, stars blow hot and cold in roller coaster year. That's the story on page 34 to 35 of the Daily Nation. On the top strip of the Daily Nation, an interesting one there, the Vatican now okay blessings for gay couples but with a caveat. And that's a story on page 11 of the Daily Nation. On the Health Nation pullout, talks about deadly delays. And on matters powering MSMEs, Farms model encourages consumers to manage waste. And elsewhere, I can't verify 12.5 billion shillings telecom share purchase, says Gadhungu, and that is the Auditor General. Yes, and that's the Daily Nation. On the back page of the Daily Nation, bill on MPs post-retirement medical scheme rejected. The bill which proposes that lawmakers' contributions to be matched by state. In numbers there, other stories, Kenyatta condemns DRC alliance recently announced in Nairobi. And that's the Daily Nation this morning.
Let's take a look at the Standard, Taifa Leo. Kwenye gazeti la Taifa Leo, habari kuu pale, KCPE ndoto zazimwa. Wengi walikosa nafasi baada ya kuteua shule chache maarufu kwa maelfu yao, huku shule hizo husika zikiwa na nafasi finyu. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili. Maelfu ya watahiniwa wakosa kupata shule maarufu za upili walizoteua. Vidokezo vingine kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo: pale chini, bei ya kahawa haijapanda. Viongozi Mlima Kenya wakosoa Rais Ruto kuhusu madai bei ya chai na kahawa imepanda. Kwingineko, tumia Krismasi kushusha gharama ya maisha, asema askofu. Askofu Muheri awataka viongozi serikalini na pamoja upinzani kuja pamoja kusaidia raia ambao wanaumia. Kwingineko, Jubilee mbioni kuanza kusajili wanachama. Katibu Jeremiah Kioni asema zoezi hilo linalenga kuimarisha chama hicho mashinani. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa 4. Vidokezo zaidi pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo: acha vitisho, mawakili waambia rais. LSK ya teta, rais anakosea kutisha wanaopinga ushuru wa nyumba kotini. Kwingineko, masuala ya spoti: City, Arsenal wapewa wanyonge. Manchester City kuchuana na Copenhagen, huku Gunners wakipewa Porto. Masuala ya spoti na UEFA Champions League kwenye ukurasa wa 20 katika jarida la Taifa Leo hii leo.
Let's have a look at the People Daily. The top headline there, of course, a similar one to what we have on the other dailies. Big fight for Form 1 slots. And yes, sorry. The selection exposes yawning gaps in quality of schools as KCPE candidates scramble for places in national institutions. Counties lacking enough classrooms spill to neighboring ones, and slum children get some relief. And that's a story on page 4 of the People Daily this morning. Other stories on the People Daily on the top strip: Kenya-EU signed trade agreement, and the deal is expected to boost local manufacturing and enterprise as European Union also gets access to regional bloc. On matter security there, Uhuru denounces DRC military pact, and as the facilitator, this is a quote by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta: as the facilitator, I repudiate these developments, particularly their military character and accompanying politically charged and provocative rhetoric. On the top strip of the People Daily, Ruto's rule on internships and costly careless driving. Close to 4,000 died on Kenyan roads in 1 year, says that's what the CS for Transport says. And that's the People Daily this morning.
Let's move on to the Star. And on the Star, different headline totally. This is according to the Auditor General: 23 state farms in deep financial mess. National Oil Corporation's negative working capital has increased to 7.1 billion shillings. And NEC also has cash flow problems. NEC's liabilities outdid its assets by 1.8 billion shillings. And I remember the president talking about some of these issues being part of the reason why some of these state corporations need to be privatized. Matters road safety: drive safely. Kenyans just want to enjoy Christmas, not be killed. That's according to the CS for Transport, Kipchumba Murkomen, yesterday, as he launched a road safety campaign as we get into the festive season. And a number of photos there. The roads CS interacting with some drivers, matatu drivers there yesterday. Meanwhile, also pictures of some recent road accident incidents where people have lost their lives. And we have photos there on the front page. The only other highlight on the front page of the Star this morning is on the economy. Don't dare hike fees. Education CS Machogu warns school principals. That story is on page 7. And we do hope that the principals will heed this directive by the CS, not to hike fees. Yes, that's the front page of the Star this morning.
Let's have a look at the Business Daily. The top headline there: mastermind lays off 1,000 after bank takeover. And the firm owned by estate of late tycoon Wilfred Murungi, the cigarette manufacturer, also battling KRA tax claims. Another story there: Kenya a step closer to new EU trade deal. That's some of the big stories on the Business Daily there. The top strip, an opinion by Frederick Ogola: President Ruto should focus more on domestic issues to attract foreign direct investment. On the lower strip of the Business Daily, auditor barred from 12.5 billion shillings spent on Telcom Bank shares. And that's the Auditor General Nancy Gathungu has said her office was denied access to transaction records of 12.5 billion shillings share purchases in Telcom Kenya and 2 development banks, raising questions on the legitimacy of the deals conducted in the last financial year. Others, sorry. Help me.
Oh, yeah. Still on the ticker, sorry for that. Maize flour subsidy debt hits 3.4 billion shillings. Debts to millers who supplied maize flour under the state subsidy last year have hit 3.4 billion shillings, pushing some processors out of business. Elsewhere, IMF opens more zero-interest funding to Kenya. Kenya's access to interest-free resources from the IMF has been bolstered in reforms undertaken by the lender to enhance allocations to members. Yes, these are just some of the stories. And on the back page of the Business Daily, consumers start feeling loans pain as banks raise rates. Equity and NCBA move fast to adjust the cost of shilling-denominated loans by nearly 3 percentage points, signaling tougher times ahead for businesses and individuals. That's a Business Daily today.
Let's cross over to Uganda. The Daily Monitor, the top story there, incest cases stall passport issuance.
And you can't imagine such a headline in Kenya, surely.
Come on, Uganda.
Wow.
Interesting. I think these people just, someone just wakes up and decides.
But
just going with this.
These are very, you see, once you see such a headline, you want to read the paper.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting headline.
Yeah.
Incest cases, stall passport issuance, and how some random acts by some people, whether misinformed or probably it's a cultural thing, is affecting now nationwide identification processes. Yeah.
Interesting. Other stories on the Daily Monitor, on the top strip, court confirms 78 charges against ex-KRA Ribo Koyelo. And yes, other stories on the lower strip of the Daily Monitor. Man shows up for passport application with snake in a bag. There's just weird headlines in Uganda this morning. And government scraps visa fees for all Congolese nationals. Other stories there. Sobi killed in Gomba land fight, the police say. Those are some of the interesting headlines in the Daily Monitor in Uganda this morning.
And you missed that big one where the photo is of those fuel guzzlers.
Oh, yes.
3 billion shilling vehicles for former speakers of parliament. Okay, fine, 3 billion Ugandan money.
Yeah.
But former speakers of the houses of parliament in Uganda are each getting a car, a fuel guzzler. And the photos are there on the front page of the Daily Monitor. It's interesting.
It reminds me when there's a proposal by former governors for the current governors to give them jobs.
Yeah, they say they have a lot of experience. Well, even in Kenya, there's been some debate on whether or not former members of parliament should be granted some emoluments as well. Those who served in the various houses of parliament from 1963 and are not back, they say, yeah, they served this country and therefore need something.
Can people retain?
Yeah. But the big headline on the Daily Monitor, incest cases stall passport issuance. And I think it's important that we go through this detail. The Internal Affairs Ministry says it is stuck with processing at least 80 passport applications due to incomplete information provided by applicants that are children begotten by close relatives. And it makes it to the headline on the front page, no less. In Kampala, Uganda, Daily Monitor. Big news today. Let's go to Tanzania.
Yeah.
Kwenye gazeti la Mwananchi kule Tanzania, NHIF yapunguza gharama za tiba, yaboresha viwango kuwaona madaktari bingwa, sasa kulipiwa sawa hospitali ya taifa, kanda na mikoa. Wanaopata huduma za kusafisha figo wapata afueni, wanaita ahueni. Dawa lukuki zaongezwa kwenye orodha ya dawa muhimu. And their Swahili is a bit different from ours.
Yeah.
I think we would have said afueni.
They're
saying ahueni. Yeah?
The Swahili is so complex.
Yeah. Kwingineko kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, Mbowe Mnyika walivyoguswa kiapo kinamdii. Habari zaidi, wauguzi wa kike wenye sifa hizi kula ajira Saudia. Watoto watatu wa familia moja walivyoteketea. Na katika makala ya simulizi mahakamani, hatua kwa hatua siku ya mauaji ya bilionea Msuya. Habari zaidi pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, Samia abeba kilio cha ETS, uhaba wa dola, umeme. Na hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi kule Tanzania.
Let's have a look at the Citizen. The top headline there, Samia pledges action on ETS, dollars and power, and the President Samia Suluhu Hassan has said the government is addressing the bottlenecks manufacturers in Tanzania are grappling with, including long-standing complaints about electronics tax stamps. And that's the big story on the Citizen this morning. Other stories there, winners and losers as NHIF adjust rates. And that's a story on page 2 of the Citizen this morning. And yes, we found ourselves on the Citizen what Kenya-EU trade deal means. That's the story on page 3 of the Citizen this morning. Other stories, DR Congo's plan to boost its share of East African trade. And yes, those are some of the, yes, on the top strip, in matters international, Israel faces mounting anger over civilian death toll. Yes, and those are just some of the stories on the Citizen this morning.
Okay. Let's come back home and take a look at the cartoons this morning. We start off with the Standard rather, and the cartoon is on page 16. It has a very big crocodile there, branded corruption, and a smaller crocodile on its nose, saying that we remain steadfast in our fight against corruption, and the smaller crocodile is the EACC. Yet EACC cannot even compare in size to the task at hand. Yes, they may remain steadfast in the fight against corruption, but it's patched on the corruption's nose. Interesting comparison there by Gado on page 16 of the Standard.
On the Daily Nation, page 15 of the Daily Nation, the cartoon there, there's a caricature of what seems like the president and his deputy president there leading the Kenya Kwanza vehicle, and there's the housing levy UHC Haiti deployment parastatal sale. And I think it just speaks volumes on how the government has been ignoring some of the rulings by the High Court, and they're saying our way or the highway.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the driver of this car is holding that sword.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, exactly, the details of the weekend. The sword, see
kukata mboga. So yes, it's come under a lot of criticism, including from the Law Society. And yes, our way or the highway, that's a cartoon on the Nation. On the People Daily, the cartoon today, and Stano is sticking to the festive season. You have a donkey carrying a woman there, and a gentleman pulling the donkey, but then they encounter police with their dog, and this donkey is heading towards Bethlehem. So the police say, you are in trouble riding a donkey without lights, no license, overloaded, no insurance, no safety belt, no helmet. And then another cop says, Madam, shuka twende station, ama toa 2K ya macho. Yes, if Joseph and Mary were in Nairobi, these are the cops they would encounter on their way to Bethlehem. That's a cartoon on page 10 of the People Daily by cartoonist Stano. And yes, those are some of those are our dailies today, and probably we could recap some of the top stories this morning before we take a break. I don't know if my director is ready for that. Yes, Cabinet Secretary of Roads and Transport Kipchumba Murkomen has urged all road users, especially those using private vehicles, to be extra careful when using the roads during this festive season. He added that majority of the road accidents have occurred during the weekends when drivers drink excessive alcohol, and therefore urged on the need to observe traffic laws. Speaking during the launch of the Usalama Barabarani campaign by National Transport and Safety Authority, the president of the Matatu Association, Alex Karagacha, urged the government to provide specialized training for Matatu drivers in a bid to reduce road carnage.
I call upon all of us Kenyans to take a personal responsibility for the choices we make while on the roads, minimize the motivation behind risky road behavior. Accidents happen particularly around the towns and cities are between Friday evening and Monday morning. And all of them, or most of them, are related to drunk drivers. Also private vehicles are, most of them, the ones who are knocking pedestrians.
And going forward, we've urged the government that we must have a PSV training school so that going forward, it will help in terms of training the drivers.
But we urge Kenyans to take care, to be safe. The speed that thrills is actually the speed that kills. Avoid overtaking. Bodabodas especially, imagine you, musiwe na haraka, wanakuanga na haraka sana. They are very impatient. We are urging them to take time.
I call upon all of us Kenyans to take a personal responsibility.
Yes, and that's just one of our top stories as prepared for you by the TV47 News Desk. After the break, we'll be looking at the state of the nation. Today, Mark Okuru Echakara, transformational leadership and governance expert, will be in studio alongside Dr. Julia Shege, governance expert, and Mesha Kodede, political commentator. Do stand by for that conversation. Plus, Limuki will be having another conversation later on.
Yes, on matters...
intersection of climate change and gender-based violence. Wow, interesting.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation. Yeah, I definitely don't want to miss that.
Do stand by for that later on this show. But remember, you can be part of this conversation through our social media pages on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. You're watching Morning Cafe. Kenya's most sought-after high schools, that's the headline on the Daily Nation. Scramble for Kenya's dream high schools, that's Daily Nation, the Standard rather. And on the People Daily, let me just confirm for you how they crafted the headline, revealed big fight for Form 1 slots. So yes, that's a big talking point today. Matters to do with Form 1 selection that ended yesterday with the revelations of some of the schools that are in high demand. Now, this morning we're privileged to have in studio Dr. Julia Shege, governance expert and resilience award winner 2023. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
Also with us in studio is political commentator Meshak Odede. It's good to have you in studio.
Thank you, Fred.
Of course, we can't avoid talking about this big headline, matters education. I know we always talk about politics, but we find ourselves in a very interesting time after the debacle that was the KCPE marking, KCPE exam marking situation. Now we're seeing that the Form 1 selection and the product that has come out of it, scramble for Kenya's dream high schools. That's how all the headlines, all the dailies have decided to go with it. The Daily Nation has done us justice on the front page by breaking down the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 schools. And Kabianga High School ranks the highest with a capacity of 672, yet those who applied for that school, to join that school, are 186,357. Then we have Nanyuki High School coming second, Pangani Girls, Kapsabet Boys, Alliance Girls High School, Maseno School, Nakuru High School, Butere High School, Mangu High, and Alliance High as the top 10 most desired schools by those who do Form 4. But then again, this is the kind of system that we're trying to get away from with the transition to CBC, that it is a zero-sum game. Out of almost a million, 1.4 million candidates, everyone wants to go to 10 schools, and this has been the biggest problem. Dr. let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and good morning, our viewers. First of all, I want to commend each and every candidate who sat for their KCSE, and it's not an easy job, but we want to congratulate them. Nevertheless, going by the trends, we have seen our parents really encourage you. You need to go, if you're a boy, you need to go to Kabianga, you need to go to Pangani. You know, and if you don't meet that mark, some of the parents, they are really stressing the children. And the children also, they are also fixated that I have to go to Kabianga. If you don't go to Kabianga, then what? But my thinking is, we also went to those schools in the village, and we still excelled. So I think we need to deconstruct this notion of these top schools, this top whatever. Any school and all the teachers are trained in one area, and therefore that teacher who is teaching in a day school and the one who is teaching in Kabianga, you know, we want to use Kabianga because it's on the top of the list. They come from the same, you know, like the same factory, and therefore our children need to understand that the same education that is being given by that teacher, maybe the difference is the facility, and that is where the government need to come in infrastructure, laboratories, books, and all that. But otherwise, the teachers are the same. So our children should not be stressed to go to this and that school.
We've seen this debate even getting into politics, and I remember one MP from Kiambu County saying that since some of these schools, in fact, a huge number of these national or desired schools, since they are in Kiambu, they should be left for Kiambu people, and other counties should build their own national schools. It is a debate that is definitely alive, Meshak.
Yeah, I heard that. I think that was Gatundu South, or
yes,
somebody there. Of course, some of these MPs would just speak because by mere power of being an MP, but still doesn't mean everything they speak makes sense, because you cannot put in the same sentence wanting this school to be a Kiambu and still national, because Kiambu is not a nation. Kiambu is a county. So, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Wanting it to be a Kiambu reserved and national at the same time is not possible. You make it national by having population from the entire country in that school. That makes it national, not just a name calling national. But I think we still, according to me, we still need to decolonize a lot of things. These are things that some of them were actually left to us by our colonial masters, and we moved like that without rethinking. The alliances of this world were actually set up by the colonial masters, and they made them look good and beautiful and above everybody. So not every child would go to alliance in those days. And so we took power and say we now have our self-rule, but we did not demystify some of these things. So alliance remained there, Starehe remained there, whatever remained there. So we grew up knowing that when you go there, you look like those masters. You are master to these other ones. So including the time we grew up, you could tell the attitude of everyone when we are back from high school. You came, like my area, Kanga High School is one of them. I mean, you come back from Kanga and another person comes back from this local school in the village. It looks like you are a lesser secondary student. I mean, sometimes they even hang around together. The people who came from Kanga and those who came from Maseno cannot hang out with those who came from Rabur Primary School or whatever secondary school. The high school and the secondary
but
school.
Is it necessarily a bad thing that that kind of ranking of schools?
Yeah,
prestige has to be there. There must be some value in it.
There has to be, but the biggest value should be the content. I mean, the reason why we go to secondary school in the first place. Yeah, because why when we get to university, a lot of things have been demystified. Yes, we are still trying to force the University of Nairobi above what, but the truth and the reality tells otherwise. You came from Egerton, you came from JKUAT, you came from whatever, it's still university anyway. And I think even though we are pushing the agenda of the University of Nairobi, it does not get into the head of many students as much as it gets into the head of parents and students when it comes to secondary school. Guys are like, if you go to this, and until it became a situation where going to a village school is almost a punishment, because some parents even threatened children, like, if you don't do this, I will not take you to that school. I will take you to the school in the village here. So I think it is something we needed to decolonize from our mind from way back.
It is an issue of culture, and we've seen that some of the attempt is to even get rid of the ranking of top students. Now we're seeing, and this is a direct communication from the ministry, that this is the most sought after school. This kind of ranking is what we're trying to get rid of. But you can see the culture even within the government circles still persists. Do you think that we are ready to leave this kind of system and move to CBC, where ranking of either students or schools will no longer matter?
First of all, as much as we want to demystify the concept of top and last whatever schools, education system in our country is the most rigid system that I've seen, actually, being a scholar. And like University of Nairobi, if you say you're coming from University of Nairobi, and that is where I have always been, it's like I have some shares from undergraduate up to post, and I can tell you there's some pride. And there is a tag that is carried along with that, and they keep saying, I'm from the University of Nairobi. And that actually intimidates other people from other universities. The same case is happening from high school and secondary schools. If you, like when we were in school in Murang'a County, you see you're coming from Kahuhia, you're coming from Mogoiri. I mean, it was prestigious for girls, and the other girls would feel lesser, and that really worked very badly on the culture, the socialization, because some girls will go to some schools and think that their position is in the kitchen, and they just need to be house girls, and after that, life is like that. Them who are in those better schools, they need to be lawyers, doctors, and all that. So that really worked in the mind of the students, And my challenge is, you see, like we have seen Kabianga up to Alliance. They are talking about, we have seen the way the assimilation has been done. My concern is we have 100% transition from primary school to secondary school, but do we have 100% retainer? The answer is no. Because by the time they get to Form 2, they start dropping out because of school fees, early pregnancies, and all these things that are not being talked about. You know, we are just, fascinated with the, the hulabalu of the examination. And that is why I said the other day, I tweet and people are like, what are you telling us? And I said, the way we supervise education, examinations in this country, if it was the way we supervise development, then it would be a better country or any other thing. And my thinking would be, going forward, because we are talking about CBC, the idea, if you go to Kabianga and another one goes to whichever kind of a school, a day school, and both of you come here, and you cannot be able to do things on your own unless you're looking for a white-collar job, like your position. It's not many people can occupy. It can only be occupied by one person at a time. So we need to train our people out there. They can do courses, they can be able to get education that they can be able to start on their own. You can work, you can be in the house and you're working and you get paid,
And you've raised something very interesting about the dropout rate
yes.
in high schools. Is it directly linked to some of this ranking? Because is there a correlation? Because I would need to understand that the dropout rate, let's say, for example, from Alliance High School or Kenya High, which are most desired schools, is very low compared to the other schools. Definitely, there's some value in this prestige that we're talking about.
You see, most of the children who go to such schools, getting a scholarship will be very easy. Very, very easy. And everybody, even the people who sponsor, like even myself, I've been giving bursaries, but I don't give to needy needy students and idiots. I give needy and bright. That concept is the one that makes these children not to drop out. But you can have children who are needy and they are bright, they're in day schools, but they don't have money, you see. So that discrepancy, and everybody else want to go to Kabianga, They don't want to go to that day school and find out what is happening. So that is a challenge that we have.
Bwana Odere, do you think we'll be able to actually shift to a time when ranking will not be there? Because that's a desire, and that is a communication, especially with the JSS and CBC curriculum, that we should get to a point where these schools will be more of pathway schools and not ranking depending on exam performance.
I think with time we will be able to, but it will take us some little time. It's not an instant thing that tomorrow, because this thing has been put in our mind for ages, so we cannot expect to just run away from it one morning when we wake up. So you see, when, like I said at the beginning, when the whites were here, they had built schools like Alliance to create good civil servants there, because for them, the idea was not to leave Kenya and other African countries to go back. The idea was to rule and be here for long. So they were setting a long-term goal where schools like Alliance were to give them the quality civil servants they want, and later on universities and all that. But when they left midway, we did not sit down to begin to imagine that why were we even going to school? For the whites, they were not taking us to school then because they wanted a learned country, everybody is learned. They were taking a few specific individuals. They realized this one has got a very sharp brain. So when we take this to Alliance and sharpen further and later to university, will give us the kind of civil servants we want. So the idea was not to have a nation learned. But then when they left, we did not sit down and think, rethink, and probably take back what was not working for us. So right now, the schools like Alliance had gone ahead, and like she says, some of them had already gotten into this tendency where if Fred is maybe the best mathematician in teaching, we take them to Alliance. If Meshach is the best geographian, we take them to Alliance. And then by that alone makes everybody wants to go, because even in the Bible, people wanted to know during the first philosophers in Greek, they wanted to know, before you address them, who was your teacher and things like that.
There was prestige even in who taught you.
Even in who taught you. My professor is so-and-so. So by that time, we started taking the best teachers to Alliance, the best teachers to this school and that school, and then this other school remained there for the sake of having others in school. So with that, it will take us another few years. It cannot just diminish one morning. So we will get there, yes, but it will take us time, and it will take us a lot to undo some of the things that were put there, and when we took over our self-rule, we perpetuated it even further.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting conversations, especially around education this morning. It is the big headline across all the major dailies. You're watching Morning Cafe. Let's take a break. Don't go too far. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. We still continue looking at the state of the nation with Dr. Julia Shege and governance expert and political commentator Meshach Odede. Just before the break, we were looking at the big headline matters to do with Kenya's education sector, in specific the Form 1 selection process that ended yesterday. And the issue of ranking of schools, even in as far as which school is more desirable. But there's an even bigger question, and this has to do with the politics. And the Kenya Kwanza administration has had at least one clear calendar year to preside over the academic calendar. And I'd like to know what your assessment is of its handling of education matters specifically. We saw that debacle with the KCPE marking. We do expect KCSE results even as early as this week, according to some indication. And we've had issues to do with university education and university funding, all within this first 1 year. What is your assessment of how this administration is handling the education sector?
I think from where I sit, this government, without fear or favor and without thinking I'm on this side or the other, there is a mislink or a disconnect between what we expect and what is on the ground. First, the first time we have seen a lot of theft was last year. A lot of theft.
Exam cheating?
Examination cheating. Some schools, ranking very high, and they have never been there before, I'm not saying that they cannot emerge fast, but common sense dictates if somebody has been getting 250 marks, there is no magic of getting 400. They can push to 300 or below 200 or 200. So that magic, I call it an abracadabra. It's something that we need to be explained. The other thing is when the government want to separate and put a caveat on who should be given bursary or the help. And we know very well, help has really helped very many Kenyans in this country. And I want to speak to especially my community very well. And they're the people who need this education more than any other person. Because our coffee, our tea is not doing very well. And so what else can you give a child? And when you see help being sort of that we need, there is a child who will be given what percentage, at what point do you let a child to who is going to get what? So that one is bringing a lot of issues. There's corruption, of course, involved. Of course, there could even be nobody to be given that bursary because we could say, Fred, you are supposed to be at 40%, so you are at 10%. So how do we get to know you are at 10 and 40, and who was given at 40, who was given at 10, So I think for me, that needs to be looked at, and I want to speak to the people who are in charge of education. At times they see us commenting on such a thing, and we look like we are mad people. We are not, because they are paid to actually tell Kenyans what we are telling them. They need to come up with a solution, because help is very necessary, especially for the university students. So when that was removed and it was coined in another way, for me, it didn't make sense. For me, I saw it as a downfall. For me, I saw it as a way of clubbing down education, and therefore, our parents, you're on your own. Parents, you're on your own.
Coming from a regime where there was a lot of push towards eliminating exam cheating, from when Matiang'i was CS for education, and then eventually Professor Magoha. How do you compare the situation then and where we are now?
Thank you, Fred. For us to gauge this regime, we must find out what did we want as a country on matters education. And I think the country took a clear path back in 2002 when Kibaki came into power, because Kenyans overwhelmingly voted that government on 3 promises. And one of the key promises that we still remember until now was free education, free primary education. And so the regime that took over from Kibaki only needed to escalate it to high school and further to universities and all that. Even though we had help in the universities during the time of Moi or even before, we needed to get to a place where everybody who goes to university has got that help no matter what. So we eliminate chances of somebody sitting somewhere to decide whether Fred should get help or Meshach should not get help. So we were to go there. So we can only judge this regime on that parameter, that what was our nation's thinking towards issues of education for our children. And then Uhuru and the regime that went got us to a point, if you remember, we were very close to achieving 100% transition. If you remember the way Matiang'i in the education, like you're saying, and Professor Magoha went through to comp even the villages to know that every child who sat for primary is actually transiting to a certain level, whether it is technical or vocational studies, whether it is university or mid-level colleges. Everybody was transiting. So we were at 90-something, and we were really hopeful as a country that this regime would take over, and number one agenda or priority would be to ensure that happens. But from where we see it, I see us going back to 60 or 70% transition. Why do I say that? Like Dr. has said, when you begin to leave this in the hands of a few people again, to sit somewhere and decide who gets what percentage of support for education in high school, that will limit chances of some children whose fathers or mothers or guardians probably do not have a bigger voice or are not friendly enough, and politics will set in. Because even if it were to be done by members of parliament, there's a member of parliament who knows Meshach does not like me and does not support me whatsoever.
Exactly.
Do you think my child will be able to be one of those who will get the maximum, even if they were good? Somehow, I doubt. And this will have a potential of reducing the chances of many children from transiting either from primary to high school or high school to university. Then, finally, we look at how they were able to handle the exam that had been done and marked even by the past regime. That exam alone was not handled well. Coming to the KCPE, which we just ended, Fred, you cannot imagine. My brother's son was given some marks from sign language, and he is not in that category. So I have a friend, a colleague, who clearly says, this is not the marks of my son. I know my child. The marks is higher than what the parent expected. Can you imagine such parent and what they believe? So even
the child actually got more.
The child got more, according to the parent. Yes, the parent is not the examiner. But the parent says, I know my son because you have been looking at their result
the magic
all the way from class 1 to this time. So you can gauge, like Dr. says, 200 to 300 or 300 to 400. You know my son falls in here. Then all of a sudden, the son comes back with huge marks and you're like, what? I mean, if you want to put it as a miracle, then so be it. But do we have miracles in education and exams? Very rare. I have not seen one in the recent. So when we look at all that, plus you realize immediately these issues came out and schools were actually out there in the press talking about the issues, irregularities. Even the council was called in a crisis meeting. This can tell us that this thing was not really handled well. And if an exam alone cannot be, handled well, then how best can we handle the entire education? Fred, the past regime had trained one teacher each for the junior secondary school, JSS. And there was an expectation of us as Kenyans that this regime will pick it from there and do the necessary so that next year, January, when the schools are open, we actually have more teachers in this school. So junior secondary school is supposed to be a whole school. And now we are staring at a situation, Fred, where next year we are going to have a whole school with one teacher. Is it really going to give us our children what they deserve? I doubt. And does that mean we are headed to the right place where we had imagined we should go? No. We cannot have a whole school with one teacher. Even the teacher himself or herself will be outweighed by the numbers and all that. So lastly, you look at the time Magoha, for example, was introducing this CBC thing. There was a time, the junior secondary school thing, there was a time Magoha and the team from the ministry went around the country, and some of the service providers or contractors were working even at night. It was forced on them to do this so that classrooms will be available when children open school. Is that what we are seeing right now? I doubt. I don't know in Murang'a, but in Migori, I don't see that happening. So the reality will dawn on us in January when children open school and classrooms are not enough. Intakes are going on right now because our children from preschool are already getting school and are ready to join primary schools. So when they will be in school and the dates are there and classrooms are not there, the reality will be either they are under the tree or they are sent back home. Finally, or lastly, we are looking at the report that was given to the president. You know, the president gave the team, what were they called?
Presidential Working Party on Education. And the recommendations were brought. And among the key recommendations I read was that the capitation fund or fee was supposed to be increased because teachers or management of these high schools, boardings, are saying by the time the capitation fund was set at 22,000 per year for a child, we were buying commodities at this rate. Right now, we are buying a bag of maize at this rate. It cannot feed or even fund the needs of this kid in school for the whole year. So please improve or increase the capitation fund. What did they do? We are hearing the capitation fund is going back to 15,000 instead of increasing it from 22 going up. So when I sit down as a member of the public, I realize we are moving back instead of going forward. So we are not just saying this. Nobody just wakes up and say we don't like this government or we don't like these individuals. It's not about whether we love these people or not. It's about is the right thing happening or not. And so looking at what I have said in different sectors, I realize we are not getting to the place where Kenyans wanted to be. You want to add something to that?
Yeah, actually, you have raised a very pertinent issue. You know, the issue of our children going to different schools because of the marks that they are having. No wonder we have a lot of strikes. No wonder we have a lot of drugs in schools, because if a child for sure was supposed to go to Kabiaga and had scored 200 marks, and somebody somewhere gave them 420, and that's why they're in Kabiaga. I'm not saying that their brain remains at 200, but the truth of the matter is, this child has been exposed to some competition that he was not prepared for. And no wonder you fight these children because they cannot compete. They become unruly. We have a lot of bullying. We have a lot of lesbianism. We have a lot of gayism. We have a lot of very bad things in schools. And they are coming, number one, they are coming from that. On the Presidential Working Party on education, at least I had my input on that. And the CBC is very well crafted. But the challenge that we have as a country, are we ready? Are we ready? Because if you tell a child who is in Turkana and a child who is in Nairobi, come with the 4 tall buildings in the country. The one in Nairobi is likely to get it because they have internet, they have access to very many other things. But the one in Turkana can only say our house is big, you know, depending with where they are. So the government needs to actually invest more on CBC in terms of infrastructure, in terms of materials. Otherwise, all this that we are saying will still come back to 844. I'm not a prophet of doom, but I can tell you, if this does not work, then we are going back there. And when you look at the capitation and the money that was being given to schools, if they were getting 22,000, and for sure I know they were, because I've been a board member of several secondary schools, now they're going to 15,000. When they were getting 22,000, parents were not able to pay school fees still. How about right now, they've been added an extra 5,000. And many schools are saying, hey, look, UNGA was like this much, so you need to add us this much, you know? So that means we have a problem, and we must be able to face it. But I want to encourage the parents right now. If you have a child who is going back to school, at least you must sacrifice one thing or two. Because I can tell you, the government that is not going to add, according to what I've seen the ministers and everybody around the presidency speaking, they're not going to take it back to 22. Mm-hmm. Actually, even the insurance has been removed, you know? So there's quite a lot. As a parent, you need to understand, when you get your child to school, you're on your own. And I want to tell parents, you must do that. Because if the parents at 22,000
were still struggling.
They were struggling. How about at 15? Wow. And the other things that have been removed, you know? So it means our children, they will struggle and we'll have very many dropouts. We are also going to have quality education. We are not going to have quality education, because if teachers are not going to be enough, what next?
Meanwhile, the school fees for secondary schools has gone up beginning January.
Exactly, exactly. So the parents must be alive to that.
Matters Education making the big headlines this morning on all the dailies. Kenya's most sought after schools, that's a Daily Nation. Scramble for Kenya's dream high schools. That's the Standard, and of course the biggest talking point this morning. I want us to move on to another issue, totally away from it, Matters Education, but also features on the front pages. It is also on the front page of the Business Daily, a photo there of the president with the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, at State House ahead of the signing of a new trade agreement in Nairobi yesterday. It also features on the front page of the Standard. Kenya ignores neighbors to sign EU deal, and also features on the front page of the Daily Nation. Kenya woos region as it inches closer to EU deal. Now, this deal that was a few years back, we're talking about the economic partnership agreement with the EU, and there was a lot of discussion on whether or not it can work. And back then, it was a joint venture alongside our regional neighbors, Tanzania and Uganda. Now we're seeing Kenya going it alone and signing an agreement with the EU. It is definitely something that offers Kenyan traders something to look forward to. And if I may just look at some of the details. Sure. Pact will grant its exports duty-free status and unlimited access to the 27-member bloc. Should we be worried? And this is Matters diplomatic relations, and we are moving closer to that conversation. Should we be worried that we find ourselves in this alone, that every other person is skeptical about this deal, but Kenya is going through with it? Of course, Matters diplomatic relations in the region have become a very huge talking point over the recent weeks. But when it comes to trade and Kenya's interests, should we really be worried about whether or not Uganda and Tanzania are coming with us? Meshach.
Thank you, Fred. You know, on Matters bilateral, I must admit that African countries have not really done well for a long time. Many times we have gone on these tables and signed things that 2, 3, or 10 years later we realize was not even supposed to be signed in the first place and was not giving our countries or our continent what they deserve. So I think because of the nature, I do not want to purport to say I know all the details, but the nature of how this deal has stalled for quite some time, and the hesitation from different countries within the region tells that there is something some people had noticed about this deal that does not really augur well with. We live in the same region. Uganda is our biggest trading partner as a country. why do we think we stand to gain? These are just the questions from outside. I mean, I'm not discussing inside the details because I don't want to purport to know the whole details. But the question in a normal mind of a Kenyan is, if Uganda are hesitant about this deal, Tanzania is hesitant about this deal, then why do we believe as a country? Because that is where I want my government to convince me. Why do we believe as a country that we stand to gain more in this deal and as opposed to them and as opposed to Uganda? Because if the deal was supposed to be for us as a bloc, then why do we think the deal favors us as Kenyans and does not favor Uganda, does not favor Tanzania? If it is that, then it was a bad deal in the first place, because we do not want to thrive in the region where everybody is going down. So if at all the deal was good for us as Kenyans and bad for Tanzania and Uganda, because somebody might justify that, for us as a Kenyan, it is good and our priority is the first thing. So that means for me, in the spirit of African and African brotherhood, that deal was bad. Because if it was giving me as a Kenyan the best and giving Uganda a raw deal and giving Tanzania a raw deal, then it was a bad deal. But then if the opposite was also the case, that it was bad for all of us, then our government is closing eyes on something that is going to hit us really, really bad. So whichever way you want to look at it, it does not give me that sense of courage that this deal is good. Because if it is good only for Kenyans and bad for Tanzania and Uganda, it's still a bad deal for Africa.
Yes, and the Standard puts it very well that Ruto upstages neighbors with historic European bloc deal on trade. But some of the issues that had been raised, some of the concerns that had been raised, and according to the Standard, there's a senior counsel, Feroz Noroji, in a recent commentary, had quoted the issue where the EU was demanding an 80% removal of tariffs on its goods coming to East Africa. And that was part of the concerns that even our neighbors were not comfortable with. Yet we find ourselves as Kenyans more and more dismissing sentiments from around, especially from our immediate neighbors, that, okay, fine. And it may be a minute situation or a minute problem, but, they didn't come for our 60th Independence Day. They don't have to. Do this, they don't have to. You see some of, and we'll come to this, like, there was a CS on TV yesterday talking about Rwanda in very dismissive fashion. And there was another one who tweeted about Sudan in very dismissive fashion. And it's a whole handling of the diplomatic relations. But when it comes to a big deal like this one, are you concerned that probably Kenya is going it a bit too blindly?
Fred, for sure. This is a very bright deal. It's misinformed, it's greedy or gluttonous, in my view. Because if other countries are seeing something wrong with it, and collectively we've been working together, and all of a sudden, somehow Kenya is feeling this deal is the best. And I think it's a question of the chest dumping that is within government and within very many ministers and all that. And from the presidency, I mean, his advisors will advise according to what they feel, you know. And sometimes I feel they misadvise him, because I wonder sometimes who advises him, you know. Because the president and the presidency, you cannot separate, you know. And I think it's a high time Kenyans realize that the world is watching, and our neighbors are already watching. No, don't even talk about the Jamhuri and whatever happened, and many others that will come. But this kind of a deal, the EU deal, for me, it was supposed to be a no-go zone. But I think our Kenyan government want to go there and show other people, yes, we are there. We know it, and we are the first one. I mean, with all those kind of chest dumping, and then it is an empty deal by the end of the day, because we cannot live in isolation. Let's take a very small example. The onions we are taking in Nairobi, they are coming from Tanzania. We don't have enough ourselves. Tanzania is giving us more food than any other country. Then you cannot tell me that we cannot have a good international relation. Uganda, the fish that is coming from there, you cannot tell us that, and our traders around the Maraba border, you cannot tell us that we don't need them. Yet, our Kenyans are crossing there every day and working there every day. So, for me, they need to relook into it. I'm sure there is the Economic Council. I don't know who is reading it currently. But I think they need to relook into it. There is a mess, and we need to call it out. And we don't have to massage the ego of whoever is dealing with that. Okay. So I think that's my opinion.
And allow me to welcome Mark Okuru Echakara, transformational leadership and governance expert, to this panel. Bona Echakara, you found us discussing this issue of the signing of this deal with the European Union yesterday by President William Ruto. And the concern is that this economic partnership agreement was discussed probably more than a decade ago, and it was supposed to bring together all the East African countries. It was initially an EAC-EU deal, but now we're seeing Kenya going alone, and we're wondering whether or not Kenya is right in doing this. Definitely there is some strength in numbers. Multilateralism is way better than bilateralism, and do you share those concerns that by Kenya going alone in this and according to the standard upstaging the neighbors, that there could be some risks that you're staring at in the long run?
Well, first of all, Fred, thank you so much for having me here today. The deal that was signed by Kenya and the European Union yesterday, when you look at it from Kenya's interests, sometimes as a nation, you look at your most pressing interests. And just like you rightfully said, it is something that has been in the works for almost a decade now. And some of our neighbors have been hesitant, even Kenya itself. The fact that it has not signed it until now means that they also probably had some reservations on the whole thing. But I believe that for us to have signed it, I'm sure it was not in the same state it was in when it was initially initiated. I believe that there have been some changes, and some of our concerns have been addressed. One of the biggest problems that we have right now is that we have a very pressing economic environment. And as a nation, any leader in William Samoei Ruto's position would not envy finding themselves in a position of having to choose whether to sign a deal or not. But anything that would bring any kind of reprieve whatsoever to our economy would be more than welcome. And I believe that going forward, that we will be able to address. And my prayer is that our neighbors will also come on board eventually, because the European Union right now is probably one of the biggest trading blocs. So really, we cannot afford to ignore it. So eventually, my prayer is that our neighbors will also come on board. It might not be a multilateral arrangement, but even themselves, because I believe the European Union is also engaging with them as individual states within the EAC. So I believe that eventually they will all come on board, even if as individual states, each of them will have their own concerns addressed. I think that is.
Fred, yeah. I don't know where my friend is coming from, but I would love somebody to tell me what the issue is, because the issues have been, underlined. And this is, to me, not a matter of prayer. There is nothing to pray about our neighbors coming. Our neighbors have said clearly, and I think it is also a position that many of us in Kenya would share, that the EU are pushing us to accept this deal with a condition that their goods, manufactured goods from the other side, will come here when we have removed 80% of the tariffs. And do you know what that means? That means they are going to kill our manufacturing, because there is no way Kenya can compete with the goods from the other side. Definitely, our mindset are also filled with anything from abroad is the best.
Do you feel that probably we are in such a bad situation that we've been forced to accept any deal, however bad it may be?
This could be the reason why my president is all over gallivanting about looking for jobs abroad, when the jobs are supposed to be made here. So he is actually promoting the manufacturing on the other side instead of promoting the manufacturing here, so that our goods can... When will the goods from Africa also go to the shelf on the other side? When you're telling them, bring your goods, less 80% tariff, that means you and I have no chance competing a company from Germany or a company from France. And you're here telling me we are just praying. This is not a matter of prayer for me. This is a matter of saying the right thing. Do we need to kill our manufacturing, or we need the manufacturing here to grow and compete the rest of the world? Yes, we need it. So which situation is Ruto in that the other countries are not in?
Okay. Actually, I feel for the president, because even if we want reprieve at the expense of what?
Exactly.
At the expense of what? And let me speak like a politician, because I am one. I vied, you remember I told, and I'm going back 2027, maybe even for a better seat, or a bigger seat. That's a story for another day.
For president.
Wait, Mishek, we have a president in place. Now, I think the Socio-Economic Council, if there is such a thing in this country, what we need to actually look at is the cottage industries that are going to help in the counties, and as a result, we are going to wake up the economy. When we finished the general election 2022, I started a small cottage industry in Murang'a County of producing dried arrowroot value addition, doing arrowroot crepes, arrowroot flour, arrowroot biscuits, arrowroot, most of our products is arrowroot, including there's a biochemist who came to our company and is telling us we can do arrowroot erosion, and I'm waiting to see it anyway. The only thing I'm not going to do is the wine, because I don't prescribe to that faith, And I can tell you the handles that we have had to go at my level. It's a community-based organization, and therefore it is owned by the women. And I can tell you, for these women to even access cabs, these women to access Kildi, these women to access licenses, these women to access very many things, it is a very big handle. Talk of taxes. The other day I tried to educate them about taxes that we need. I'm telling you, half of my class was sleeping, because it didn't sound like anything they want to listen to. So for me, I think where we can be able to revive the economy of this country, we have very good ideas. If you come to the University of Nairobi, you go to the library, you do not need to think. You just need to go to the University of Nairobi or any other library, and you are going to get ideas on how to revive the economy. So for me, where we come from in terms of manufacturing, if that is going to be killed by the EU, then we don't need it. We need to strengthen our manufacturers, people who are able to produce things, The other day I saw we are even importing little things as like rice. When we know very well Moya rice is still is a lot in Moya, So we need to look at all these things. Okay. And for now, what our legislators should be doing, we have the long lanes that are coming. We have the short lanes right now. We have in Nyandarua excess of potatoes. And I'm telling you, those potatoes, even cows and goats are not eating, because there's too much now. But I'm asking myself, now we have surplus of potatoes. Tomorrow we don't have any potato. And the same farmers will be going hungry. Why can't we think of coolers, a cooling system, or a value chain system of how we can be able to preserve our food? Okay. The rains are with us right now. And I think the Minister for Water needs to look at how do we harvest this water, because the drought is coming. And right now we have more than we need in terms of water. So I think we are misguided, and I think this country is not short of people with brains that can actually help the government. Okay. I think the government is a high time they embrace all this diversity.
And it's very true, because it's an issue of concern, and I can see it features even on the front page of The Citizen, which is a daily in Tanzania. And although I've not read the story, but they say what Kenya-EU trade deal means to them, and that story is on page 3 of their daily, meaning it is a going concern. But Bwana Chakara, the issue is that the president has come under criticism, especially when it comes to dealing with the international bodies, the IMF, the World Bank, that due to the kind of economic situation we are in right now, he finds himself at a weaker position in terms of negotiating and representing this country. The EU is a very large bloc. The EU is a 27-member country, definitely with more muscle as compared to Kenya going there individually. When Kenya, a small East African country, is negotiating with the EU, strength in numbers do matter. But when you go there alone, the concern is that we may be bulldozed into a deal that is not so good. Don't you think that these are real concerns?
Fred, it's a reality. It's something that needs to concern all of us. And I think right now, when we are in a difficult situation as a nation, and we are going through a serious economic problem, the easiest thing anybody could do, or role anybody could play, is play the critic. Because at the end of the day, nobody will call you to account. You can go anywhere, you can go to your backyard, shoot a little video, critique the government, and go away, and nobody will really call you to account. But the challenges that we are going through as a nation are enormous. And I believe that, that really nothing really is cast on stone. Whatever deal there are, there is always, I believe, there is an opportunity for review. And the deal that Kenya signed with the EU grants our traders access to a market in an environment that is predictable. They can be able to plan long term, unlike in the past. Because you see, for over a decade, this deal has been in the works. And for all that time, our traders and those who are trading with the European Union could not plan anything with certainty because there was no deal in place. But at least right now, this gives us an aspect of certainty, even that we can be able to plan long term. It might not be the perfect deal for us, but at least it is something. There is some benefits that's going to come to us. And like you said, as I said earlier, our neighbors have a reason to be concerned, you see, because we live within a community. We are not a nation that lives in isolation. We are part of a community of nations, and our immediate neighbors are actually among our biggest trading partners.
Do you feel that Kenya is more and more becoming isolated in this region?
I cannot say so, but you see, it's not the European Union aspect alone, because you see, there are...
even beyond the EU.
There are times when our neighbors have made their own independent decisions and run with what they think is convenient for them and it's good for them as a nation. And so I don't think that nobody should really begrudge Kenya for taking a position. It might not be the perfect one for our community, but even our neighbors at some point in time, they have also made some decisions that are not, collective. They have decided to make their own decisions that are independent from Kenya and have not carried Kenya along.
So, Fred, I need someone to really convince me how this deal is different from how we killed Eveready. When I grew up in this country, when I was young, I used to see Eveready as one of the biggest companies that this country had. And every other time we were even watching football on KBC, Eveready and others were the companies sponsoring a lot of things. The people, I guess, who are employed by Eveready and all that, the whole chain, all the way to the retail, was big. But how did we kill Eveready? Because duty-free import of Tiger brand from China. I was alive, I saw it already going down, and it is nowhere right now. So somebody needs to really convince me how this deal, where the EU wants to bring their goods manufactured on the other side, 80% tariff off, how that is not going to kill the few companies that are trying to come up. I want somebody to convince me on that. Other than that, anything else you are telling me how our traders, have we not been trading? Yes, okay. And now that they are going to access market in the EU, how is that more beneficial than the companies that are here and are going to die?
Okay, you want to respond?
Just
to respond to that.
Just a quick response to that. You see, the products from the European Union that are coming to Kenya are not like to like, you know, with what we are manufacturing here. Some of the products are not being manufactured here. So we cannot say because we have been given them 80%, but the majority of those products are not being manufactured here. So we cannot say that they are going to compete directly with Kenyan products. You know, for example, our agricultural products, we are not going to import agricultural products from the European Union. So it's not like for like. It's like we already have companies here that are set up manufacturing this thing, and we have invited the European Union products of, you know, similar products to come in. I mean, it doesn't work.
Don't you feel that a tariff reduction in favor of the EU in this trade agreement would affect the manufacturing industry locally?
It might, but it depends on whether our local manufacturing are manufacturing the same products, similar products. That's what I'm saying. If it's not a similar product, then I don't see how it affects.
But Mark, the other concern is on reverse. Why is it silent on the goods from here? What is our tariff on the other side? They are very clear.
What is
we need our tariff.
What is quoted there as a benefit for Kenya is we will receive duty-free and quota-free access to the EU, which is a 27-member bloc. That is a benefit.
What does that
so far? Duty-free.
Our products enter there.
They will enter there duty-free. That's a huge thing. If at all.
For me, Fred, I am still stuck at the manufacturing point, whereby, and I want to speak on behalf of women, you know, and we are saying Kenya has 51% of the women. And it means we have more women who are producing. But are their products ready for EU? Are they ready for export? What quality are they producing, you know? And for me, I look at it as a person who is doing manufacturing currently. And I look at the women that I'm with. And you tell somebody, I want to send you to Nairobi for a meeting on you know, opening up markets and all that. And they're asking me, we have not exhausted the local market, you know? So for me, I think we should be concerned with the local market first of all, because even the capital to actually get into this EU market is not within our reach. And therefore, what is going to happen, politics will be there, and anything will be produced, and our markets will just go down. And you know, our manufacturers are going to get along.
I know you want to continue with that discussion.
I think she's raised something very important, the quality of the product. You see, we live just like Kenya here. How often do we have the Kenya Bureau of Standards condemning goods that are imported because they are substandard? So we also need to invest locally and help our investors, the manufacturers, to make sure that whatever products they are producing
is of quality.
Is of quality.
The issue is the bureaucracy.
Because without even the tariff, even if those products were brought and they're expensive, anybody who goes out there and wants a quality product, they will buy it even if it's expensive.
Fred, where are we usually?
It's the bureaucracy that surrounds the standardization of the products.
Where we usually get a raw deal in Africa with African continent and countries is one. They give you something that looks like is pro you, but they know behind it. So in this deal, what is going to happen is, and believe me, we will come back here and discuss, they are going to raise standards higher. So everything that is supposed to go there duty-free, we will never meet their standards, whether it is those agricultural or whatever product you want to talk about. But theirs will be here 100%. 80% of the tariff.
Substandard.
And you know, our cabs will never say no to this from Germany or that from France.
Ladies and gentlemen,
we are having a road.
I want us to look at another issue still linked to that, and it's the handling of our international relations. With our immediate neighbors, extended East African community, and of course now this with the EU. And Kenya has come under a lot of scrutiny in recent days of its handling and statements made. Of course, the DRC is one of those, and the DRC has already recalled its ambassador to Kenya, and yesterday summoned Kenya's ambassador to DRC over that press statement released by one of the opposition luminaries from DRC in Kenya, saying they're forming an opposition alliance with the M23 rebels to remove the sitting government. And in that big interview, the president was asked this question, and he said, well, we are a democratic country. We cannot arrest anyone, and those are their own issues there. It came off a bit dismissive. Now, this is not the first instance where we have been criticized of being very dismissive in matters international relations. And I mentioned that yesterday night, CS for Roads and Transport, Kipchumba Murkomen, while appearing on Citizen TV, actually made some very curious remarks about Rwanda. And he said Rwanda is an autocracy, and whatever President Kagame says is law. Now, that is not the kind of statement you make as a cabinet secretary about a friendly nation. Yes, we've seen instances where other cabinet secretaries have tweeted about what's happening in Sudan, in the conflict in Sudan. And the question is, why are we taking our foreign or international relations so casually, making comments like those, being dismissive? It ties back to the same issue. We are looking more and more isolated in this region. Bwana Chakara.
Yeah, I think I'm also concerned about those remarks, because globally, every nation has, every group of people have a right to self-determination and to decide for themselves how best they can govern themselves. We have nations all over the world who are considered to be on the forefront in human rights abuses, but their way of doing things works for them, you know? And they determine for themselves, this is what works for us, and this is how we'll do our thing. So we are not going to be railroaded into defining democracy from the lenses of a certain nation or how they do their thing. So I think that was not right for the CS, and hopefully the Prime Cabinet Secretary, who is also in charge of foreign relations, will address this issue, because I don't think it comes out in good faith. It's not.
Yes, editor.
Yeah, I also want to echo his sentiment and maybe give my thought on this. It's the overconfidence and the politics that is in our country. I think our ministers, our civil servants, the ones that are being employed by the current government, they're still in politics, you know? And that is where you'll find maybe it's a slip of the tongue, or it's deliberate, and most likely it's deliberate because our CS is well informed. So I don't think it is, he just said it out of, you know, wanting to throw a vocabulary there. No, I think he meant
he knew
what he is talking about. But no, that exposes us to a very big threat. Remember, we have our Kenyans who are in those countries. You know, we have them who are in our country. So that kind of a struggle within the two or several countries is not going to work for us. And remember, the amount of money that we have spent on bilateral trades, bilateral talks, you know, it beats logic, you know, and that's why I keep saying government is an ongoing concern, and it is a wheel that is ongoing, and nobody can come actually and curtail it, you know. You have to keep on doing that, and I think our the Super CS for Foreign Affairs needs to address that with immediate effect.
On matters of education, we talked about the government's handling of education matters. If we look at the government's handling of our international relations, you remember the very first tweet after President William Ruto was sworn into office, was a gaffe on Kenya's relations with Western Sahara.
Yeah.
And it's 14 months later, and we still have questions about how this administration is handling our diplomatic issues.
Thank you, Fred. Allow me to say this. We are suffering from inexperience. Simple. Our government is simply inexperienced, from top to bottom. Half of the CS...
The former deputy president is now the president. A former deputy prime minister is now the super CS and in charge of foreign affairs. What inexperience are we talking about?
So if you stand in a garage the whole day, do you become a car? No. He has just been in politics, but not ready to learn anything. He didn't want to learn anything. So let me break it down. The reason why I'm saying this, there are many other nations we can talk about and we can mirror ourselves to. And you realize when it comes to electing a president or the government of the day, things like foreign policy is key issue and key agenda in their top priority of what on who is going to run their government. So I think we are just having a cabinet who maybe 2 or 3 are good with experience, like Musalia is experienced, of course, in the 80s, 89 until today, having been a minister in different positions and different governments, makes him have that experience. He has seen it. He has every other situation he can compare to something like that before and see how they went wrong and how to make it right. Even this situation, he was able to give a very good statement and he simply said, we were not aware of what that thing was, but we also saw it. We are going to investigate and come up with a clear position. You see, that is different from the inexperienced CS who says this and this and that, and that is it. Coming to this issue of DRC and the comment from President, I think partly I want to agree with the President. Yes, Kenya is very democratic, and we cannot say that the government of Kenya was simply going to arrest some individuals who are in Kenya legally. They did not cross into Kenya illegally or something like that. So that one I agree with the President. But that does not mean everything else is, I mean, if we were okay, we would not have seen in the first 1 year the change even in the foreign affairs docket. Mm-hmm. Because we had something with Canada, we had something, and that is purely talking about inexperience. Because the things we saw, we are doing this with Canada, and then the Canada embassy comes out and says, no, we are not doing this. That simply talk about inexperience. So what do you want to call inexperience if not that one? Mm-hmm. We are simply suffering from it.
Dr. Daktari says that CS Murkomen was not, it was not a gaffe. It was intentional, that comment about Rwanda. Do you agree with her?
Intentional? I do not think. I think it was just careless because the question came, what about, there has always been question around, what about our neighbor in Tanzania, it does like this, in Uganda, and then he was coming out. But in that trying to come out to defend the position of Kenya, he was a bit careless. And that carelessness is what inexperience is all about. Mm-hmm. Because people who are experienced comes out to defend, but still with tact because they have experience. Okay. That is all I can say.
Just so that this doesn't pass, he said it's an experience from the top. President Ruto is not inexperienced. And I believe he's probably the best hands that we could have on deck in this season. And the situation that we are in as a nation. And just like he has said, what the CS did was probably an ambush. You know, if you had a set of questions, you know this question is going to come, you would have prepared in advance. But when you're just ambushed by a question and the comparisons are drawn, you might easily find yourself in a similar situation. And I think on the issue of DRC, what the president, though it came out as dismissive, it is true, and he has said it, when someone is in the country legally, you know, if those people who address the press conference are members of a proscribed terror group, then Kenya would be obliged under international law to have them arrested. But these are opposition leaders people who are not terrorists, if they come and they made a statement, Kenya is not obliged to arrest them. We have the way we do things. Just like I think the CS Murkomen was trying to compare the way we do things in Kenya and the way things are done in Rwanda. The way things are done in Rwanda are different from the way we do things here. It might look like a bit autocratic, but it works for them. So we cannot say that Rwanda is a wicked nation because they don't do things the way we do them. Okay. Yeah, so that is it. Okay, and because of time, I think I'll just give each of you a minute to give your final remarks, starting with you, Dr.
Thank you so much. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And of course, matters, diplomatic relations, we should not take it, that's a joke taken too far. So we should be a bit, we should be a bit limited to what we say. If you ask a question, you don't have to comment. You can say, I'll give an answer tomorrow. And nobody is holding a gun on you to actually do that. Otherwise, we hope for a better Kenya next 2024. We hope the cost of living will be brought down. I don't know how, but we hope that things will be better. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Meshach.
Thank you. Yes, I think this might be the last show around this time. We want to say thanks to our viewers all through. And one thing, not any of us wants Kenya to fail. I mean, when we critique or talk about things that we don't think make sense, it is because we are concerned. The things that you are not concerned with, you don't even talk about, you don't even imagine you want to talk about them. So when you see Kenyans, few Kenyans here and there come and talk about these things with a lot of vigor, it is because that shows the level of concern we have for our country. So it is not because we want government to fail or we want Kenya to fail. All of us will have failed inside it. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mark Chakara.
Yeah, thank you so much, our viewers. I believe that we have discussed so many issues, and our nation is full of so many issues of concern right now. But as I've always said, we need to remain optimistic and have confidence that somehow we'll have to come out of this. You see, necessity said is the mother of invention.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe that we are in a difficult situation, and His Excellency William Samoei Ruto has acknowledged as much, and he is doing the best he can, and hopefully some or most of the things that we are concerned about will be addressed very soon. The issue for education in our education sector, we are going through a transition with the introduction of the CBC. So there are bound to be so many transition crises that are bound to arise. By the time everything settles, I believe that we will be on course and everything will be fine. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mark Okuru Echakara, Transformational Leadership and Governance Expert, Dr. Julia Chege, Governance Expert, and also the Resilience Award winner 2023.
Oh, yes. I thank the president. I mean, even next year, I think he needs to give me an OGW.
Oh, yes. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And political commentator Meshach Odede, our panelists this morning. Thank you so much for your very well-considered opinions on the matters that we've discussed, beginning with matters education and the transition to Form 1, as well as matters international relations with the signing of that EU-Kenya agreement, and of course, the gaffes that have been Kenya's foreign policy for the past